My name is Oliver Morgan. I'm the head of real estate for Deloitte in the Middle East, and have the pleasure of hosting a panel looking at how the sports and entertainment investments in the kingdom are going to change the outlook for the real estate sector. I'm very, very pleased to be joined by an absolutely fantastic panel of international and local experts today. Firstly, I'd like to introduce Mr. Simon Oaten. Simon has been a Deloitte lifer, so 25 years with Deloitte. Simon's actually the father of 5 daughters, so he's actually an expert in conflict resolution, as well as being our head of entertainment, leisure, and hospitality, and has previously been involved in major global events such as the Olympics in 2012. I'd also like to introduce Chris Styring. So Chris is a senior advisor within our global sports business group. Chris was previously commercial director with Williams Formula One, Tennis Australia and the Australian Open, and also a board member with Australian Equestrian. So interesting fact about Chris has attended over 170 Grand Prix with his time with Williams, the highlight being the win in Monaco in 2003 after a 22-year wait for a victory there. I'm also joined by Hadil Birari, a lead tax partner within Deloitte. Hadil's got 18 years experience and has been recognized by International Tax Magazine, especially as an award winner around tax disputes. And then last but not least, I'd like to introduce Wad Kearney, so Al-Khoury, who is the managing partner in Riyadh for White & Case legal firm, but also their first Saudi female lawyer in the kingdom. Thank you to the panelists, and a quick round of applause to introduce everybody.
I'll just correct the last statement, not in the kingdom. A lot of people will hate me for that.
Thank you for the clarification, Wad. So I think just to open and position in terms of the investment that the kingdom has made in events, well aware in terms of Expo being awarded, the World Cup, Asian Games and the Asian Winter Games. If you add all of the attendances to those, that's over 20 million attendees. So there's a fantastic focus in the kingdom coming up in the next 5 to 10 years in terms of a global stage and a global platform. When you layer in the context of the real estate investments, there's $1.2 trillion worth of investment in the real estate sector that is live now and that is committed projects in the kingdom. So that it is only going to increase with the investment in the infrastructure. So Simon, I'd like to come to you first and maybe just touch on your prior experience with major events. And what does the kingdom have to look forward to within its real estate sectors?
Yeah, thank you, Ollie. Well, I think, I've been working in the GCC for the last 25 years, off and on, always based in London, but a lot of time in the GCC. And first came to Saudi Arabia in relation to hospitality and entertainment projects in early 2012. And, there's been a huge amount of positive change in the period since then. But I think what major events are really going to bring to the Saudi market is that global lens to build the understanding of what the kingdom offers. And, it picks up on a lot of what Tucker was talking about in, continuing to reposition the kingdom as a global destination that people look into, that people want to come to, and that Saudis enjoy and want to stay in more of the time, one of the key objectives that you have. And broadening the investor appetite, broadening the consumer appeal, and broadening the segment opportunities in real estate. And for me, it is absolutely critical for the long-term success of delivery that it's an integrated ecosystem. It's not just about the major events themselves, but the integrated ecosystem that supports and the role that major events can play in driving that change and that global lens that was talked about previously, and we will touch on a lot more in this session.
Thank you, Simon. And Chris, you've been there, you've done that with some of the biggest events in the world. It'd be great to get your perspective, please.
Just to start with, if I may, echoing what Tucker said, a very quick story. When he mentioned it, I thought I must raise it. Our first car at Williams was sponsored. Our first sponsor was Fly Saudia, and that your wonderful flag was on the car. It was a white car with green and black, and it had the flag. And as a little boy growing up, I thought I want to do two things: work for that racing car team and come to Saudi Arabia. And I did both, luckily. So very, very fond memories of this country and what your corporations did for our team. And in 1980, we won the World Championship. So you were a big part of that. Now it's time to give back. There's a couple of things that have incredible potential in this country, one of which is the ability to be able to upskill the local workforce. The people here in this room, my three colleagues, two of which are from the UK, I'm from Australia, and my two Saudi colleagues, we have the opportunity to share our skills, share our knowledge across the sports infrastructure and major events ecosystem. And subsequently, the younger generation of boys, girls, men, women will hopefully want to join that sector. They might want to become architects, builders, sports management people like myself who consult to government. So first of all, there's that opportunity to upskill the local workforce. Now's the time to do it. Secondly, I think there's a great opportunity to build sports infrastructure that continues to give back to the community, meaning that off the back of the AFC Asian World Cup, the Asian Cup that's coming here shortly, and in fact the World Cup, these stadia will be used for young boys and girls to play football. So you're feeding that pipeline of talent. And hopefully, inshallah, you will have some world champions and some amazing national football teams. And then finally, as Simon touched on, the ability to drive sports tourism. That may be across three sectors. It may be sports tourism via the event goer. People like myself and my family who just want to come to an event hosted in the kingdom. It may be when you acquire more and more events, you will be able to host things that are bucket lists, meaning a world championship car race, or one day perhaps a Grand Slam tennis tournament. And then finally, that group of people that love going to travel because of sport and sports tourism, they want to participate. So it could be like the Hawaii Triathlon. I foresee that one day you'll have a world-class marathon. So there's tremendous opportunity, Oliver.
Yeah, brilliant. And I think it's also enjoying the domestic population enjoying these events. So a bit like at the World Cup, Saudi beating Argentina, absolutely, amazing result. And so actually living through that in our lifetime, I think is something very exciting. So, Wad, I think linking events and real estate, how can the kingdom best capture value from a professional perspective to you, but then also personally, what does good value look like also?
So first of all, it's working. First of all, it's a great time to be in the kingdom, to be a thriving lawyer in the kingdom, part of the ecosystem, the new ecosystem, and the initiative of the government. Everyone is very excited. There is a lot of value to be captured, whether culturally or economically. So to answer your questions, with these events, and since the launch of the Vision 2030, the real estate market in the kingdom has witnessed a significant transformation. Initiatives such as this forum, and the local projects such as the Giga projects, the global projects announced by the government have really drawn a great level of attention from international investors. And as lawyers, the first thing we get asked is, what is it like to operate in the kingdom? What's the legal regime like? Is it transparent? Is it efficient? So these are the typical questions that we get. And so the value, I would think, is that the legal regime is one of the key pillars to capture the value of these events and the whole Vision 2030. And indeed, we've seen the government participating and driving that initiative forward since the start of Vision 2030. Evidently, there has been a great legal reform that we're witnessing today. To give a couple of good examples, first, the judiciary system, there has been a reform to the judiciary system with the introduction of the commercial courts. Investment and commercial laws have been passed that support local and international investments equally. Government initiatives have been launched, such as the private-public partnership program, Sharik program that provides incentives to the private sector and link them to government assets. Government funds have been set up, such as the Infra Fund, the Tourism Fund, the Real Estate Development Fund, and lastly, the golden visa for expats. So eligible expats now, they have more flexibility when it comes to investments, when it comes to owning real estate in the kingdom. So yeah, these are, I think, all great initiatives and just show the level of transparency and eco-friendly market that the government is seeking to achieve. And what do I see as a person, as a national who grew up in the kingdom in terms of value? I think it's a long-lasting legacy, varying from a diversified economy with numerous jobs opportunities, an improved quality of living, and infrastructure, and finally the kingdom being positioned as a key player globally, as a hub. So that's
Brilliant.
That's a lot. I mean.
No, thank you, Wad. And really interesting in terms of the investment in the incentive side of things, laying the foundations early now in order that actually that value can be captured later as well. So thank you, really interesting perspective. Simon, your views on value, please.
Yeah, I mean, I come back to that integrated ecosystem point, and I think, the single most important thing is that major events are not just about the major event. Pre-development, in development, great thought in design and in the business models that are deployed needs to be given to the sustained economic activity that investment to deliver the major events is going to bring. And whether that be in the tourism market, in the local economy, in the mixed-use, multi-use flexibility that's deployed in the design of the stadiums to support other events, all of that needs great consideration, because at the end of the day, whilst the foreign investment into the assets themselves is of great significance, it is the ongoing sustained economic activity that will drive the biggest impact year on year, year after year, as the economy grows. And real estate has a fundamental part to play in that, but that model needs to be at the core of the development and the strategy from the beginning, on an asset-by-asset basis and at a systems level. Making sure those are connected is essential for delivering that value. And as I touched on previously, the domestic and international tourism and wider hospitality impact will drive, as it has done in all other major markets that have been successful in this major event space, a lot of that value. And if you look at the experience from London in 2012 with the Olympic Games and the other massive sporting calendars that we had around there, that transformed the hotel and the hospitality and the tourism landscape of London for the next decade. It repositioned it, and not just at the luxury segment, but all the way end to end and across hospitality, retail, and hotels in the broadest sense. And it's a repositioning that London still benefits from today, notwithstanding all of the trauma that was created by COVID and all of the other experiences that we've been through since 2012. So that long-term integrated vision and ecosystem is critical.
Yeah, brilliant. I think some good lessons learned there, Simon, to look backwards but to take forward as well. Hadil, I think in terms of value capture, tax goes hand in hand. Given the audience that we have here, a lot of real estate developers and investors, I think as one of the premier tax advisors in the kingdom, it's your views will be very welcome.
Yeah, as you know, now real estate is evolving, but when it comes to investors, there are a lot of considerations that needs to be considered in terms of what is the value, what certainty is for me. All investors, whether they're local or foreign, they look for certainty. And when you talk about taxation is all about laws and regulations. We've seen the real estate transactions tax was implemented in 2020, اللي هو ضريبة التصرفات العقارية for all of you. And the law of the real estate transactions tax was only published in October 2024. The regulations came out in 2020 with a lot of exclusions to incentivize businesses, certain, transactions from the real estate transactions law, but there's a lot of ambiguity at that time in terms of how can I recover any input VAT since real estate became exempt from VAT. Yes, this happened when VAT went from 5% to 15% during COVID, but at the same time, it created a lot of, back and forth hustles for real estate companies into this is going to have a major impact in our capex. So in terms of what the government has been working on is to find reliefs to those developers, is introducing the real estate developer scheme for input VAT recovery, for example. The different exclusions that we have seen now in the law when it was published in October 24, and we're expecting the new implementing regulations to come and further clarify these exclusions and how they can be applied in April 25. So it's really soon. So what businesses needs to consider is really their tax planning.
Absolutely.
And they need to do that at very early stages. And I'm not just talking about real estate development companies. I'm also talking about the new funds that are being created. So there's a huge rise now in terms of the real estate investment funds. And I know the CMA is very active in that area to make sure that they cater for that change, one of which we've seen the funds in the past were not able to be custodian of assets. So now they've changed the law and they introduced what they call a special purpose entity rather than a special purpose vehicle, in a sense that real estate funds can actually hold the assets. They cannot operate, but they can at least become the custodian of the assets. This comes as a way to facilitate the businesses in terms of their growth. We're seeing a lot of PIF-backed funds that are also entering into the hospitality market, but they're also coming in with foreign investors, local investors, who some of them look for long-term return, where you see the period of the fund is maybe more than 20 years, or it's maybe a REIT, but you're also seeing short-term funds where it's 7-year-old fund. I just want to maximize my return. But again, I always tell them, consider taxation.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And
it's always an issue.
Absolutely, and we're seeing this more and more in practice in terms of the clients that I deal with as well, in terms of, we are seeing the CapEx obligations and thinking about the spending and now layering in. When you start thinking about the revenue line items, we have to start thinking about RET and the transfer considerations within that, and then how do you plan for those VAT liabilities, even if you are going to get the rebates? Is there any sort of time lag, and how do you bridge those gaps? And then very much on the funds, between the last 2 years, there's been a 70% increase in the number of private real estate funds that we've seen registered as well. So I think a really interesting vehicle to deliver the projects and then capture the value as well. So I think some really innovative
you guys
moves.
work a lot on the financial advisory side of things and the valuation and the due diligence, but we're always come as a second thought, But now,
we need to work together. Exactly.
So what we're seeing now is actually businesses are, the awareness is much higher now, and businesses are saying, okay, what about taxation? Before we finalize our terms and conditions, before we, come up with the strategy, we need to consider tax, because in this market, the margins are usually very thin, and if you're hit with 15% irrecoverable input VAT,
absolutely,
you've killed it. You've killed the investment.
No, brilliant.
Yeah.
Thank you, Adil. I think, Chris, just coming back to that sporting legacy side as well, the softer side, what do you see as value in that space as well?
A lot of it is what you touched on, value. We're seeing tremendous investment in sport, offshore investment coming in for a couple of reasons. One, you provide value. You've got great properties, sports properties. You've got great sports infrastructure. So what represents value is your ability to deliver value, to do a couple of things. Be open for business, and there is no question at all. Look at us here today, over the next few days being here. It demonstrates you're open for business. There's a willingness and a hunger to work with the rest of the world. And that automatically translates to the buyer, us, whether it be a sports property, a major event, cultural event, a sports event, that there is value coming to the kingdom. Direct results of that ability to be able to operate here in an easy way, and Tucker talked about it, make it as easy as possible for people to get here. If it's not difficult and it's welcoming and it's hospitable, people will come. And we're seeing that. We're finding that. We're finding that, which is wonderful. Off the back of that, a couple of things need to happen when you're actually delivering major events, major sports infrastructure. One of which is, Simon touched on it, that ability to be able to have multi-purpose sports facilities where, and I'll give you an example from Australia, the Australian Open Rod Laver Arena. It's a stadium of 15,000 people for the Grand Slam tennis tournament that finished last Sunday in fact. First Grand Slam of the year, one of only 4. That stadium can be transformed very easily into a concert venue for music. It can be transformed into an indoor motocross arena. And if you close your eyes when you're sitting in the arena, you can't imagine that a Grand Slam tennis tournament may have happened 3 months ago when there's motorbikes racing around inside. So it's that adaptability that generates value, and it's also that longevity, embracing the thought that we've got to try and make all of these wonderful infrastructure projects as future-proofed as possible. Make them different, as Tucker said, and you've got that ability to make things different, but also try and future-proof them where you can. Because the last thing you want to do is produce something and then 20, 25 years later, which is the normal life cycle of a stadium, have to redo it. And we've got the technology, we've got the materials, we've got the know-how these days to be able to lengthen the life cycle of infrastructure. And that creates value.
Thanks, Chris. Hadil, I think moving, and we've touched on tax regulations relating to real estate already, but I think there's been a lot that has come recently, and you gave a nice recap on that. What do you envision is coming in the future? What's your thoughts on that?
Well, in terms of the changes, as I mentioned, the implementing regulations are coming in April 2024, but what we envision to see, as you know, with those great projects that are happening in the kingdom, like you have the World Cup, the Expo, the Asian Games, there's a lot of also government support when it comes to the projects in terms of subsidies and boot contracts, I would say. The boot contracts where the private sector will build and operate, but at the same time will own the asset for a certain period of time, brings in a layer of complexity, but they're heavily used in that sort of projects, in that size. Recently, the ZATCA, the tax authority in the kingdom, issued a guideline around when to account for taxation, because this has been an issue for the past 4 years. Tax for boot contracts were accounted for at the signing date, but here you're talking about a huge taxation on the actual structure of the shell of the buildings or whatever immovable assets that are attached to it. But now, with the clarifications and the government understanding into how the real estate taxation is actually impacting those businesses, they're bringing in additional reliefs, and this is what we're expecting to see more. So now, for boot contracts, for example, the taxation would apply at the transfer date, which will happen maybe 30 years or 25 years down the line. So this is great to see. And we're seeing a lot of other subsidies and where the government is actually bearing the taxation on, for example, when they seize properties, when they decide to take over the dir'iyah, they're also saying, we're going to bear the taxation. They're coming up with a lot of support to the private sectors and to individuals in terms of, making sure that fiscal neutrality is maintained in the real estate market.
Brilliant, thank you. And Wad, just to come to you on the real estate market and the recent regulation changes, some very, very recently, as in 2 days ago.
Thank you. So first of all, very exciting change about Boots. It's my business and what I do, and definitely a lot of my clients will be happy to hear the news. In terms of, and to add to what Hadil said, to answer your question, and as I mentioned earlier, the government has shown massive efforts to transform the legal market. And this is all done to diversify the economy and to achieve the Vision 2030. That resulted in a broad set of pro-investment regulatory developments. And I will mention some of them, not all of them, because there a lot, and I hope I don't bore you with the examples, but one of the key examples is the mortgage market, the changes that have been introduced to the mortgage market. Previously, what we would see in transactions when it comes to mortgages, which would sort of impact the bankability of projects, especially if you have international lenders and investors coming in, is that mortgages would, thank you. So mortgages, the title deed would be transferred to the lending entity because we couldn't perfect the mortgage. Now, I think I would say in 2016, around the time of the vision, that changed, and to know the owner of the land holds the title deed, and the title deed gets annotated. That really created a major shift in the bankability of projects. Another example is the movable assets law. Before, now we have a security registry system that registers security over movable assets. That wasn't the case before. The system wasn't 100% clear. So what that did is that it improved and enhanced the bankability of projects, especially greenfield projects. Another example is the special economic zones. Now we have various special economic zones offering flexible regulatory regime and tax holidays, as well as flexible ownership terms, obviously with the proper licensing from the relevant authority being granted. Also, another example is the civil transaction law. Before, we did not have contractual arrangements codified in one law. Now, this civil transaction law, it has really transformed the way we analyze and perceive contracts and the enforceability of contracts, which really gave assurances to international investors who don't really understand the enforceability of uncodified principles.
Just to add here,
ahead.
on the civil law, the transactions law, it's actually brought in a clear definition of real estate.
Yeah.
I think this is crucial for real estate businesses, is to refer to other laws and regulations where real estate was defined differently, because we get a lot of questions also from a tax perspective in terms of what qualifies as a real estate asset. For example, the towers, the telecom towers. We had a lot of questions around, but I think the civil transactions law kind of clarify what is movable and what's immovable.
True.
Yeah.
True, definitely. I mean, before we had to be inventive when we drafted security documents to distinguish movable and immovable assets, and who owns what, and what does it mean to have a lease, and what's going to happen to the assets on that lease when it terminates. So, and I'm not going to bore you any longer, just a couple of more examples. Very recently, the investment law was announced, and it will come into effect, I think, next month. This is a huge, major change to what we have currently, which is the foreign investment law. The foreign investment law only regulates foreign investors' activities, whereas this new investment law will regulate both international and local investors equally, granting them equal rights and a streamlined system. And the announcement that you're very excited about, Oliver, is that 2 days ago it was announced that non-Saudis can invest in listed companies developing properties in Mecca and Medina. That's a huge development. Before, Mecca and Medina were limited to Saudi citizens in terms of investments and, to date, ownership of units and houses and residential, units again. A couple of initiatives that were launched by the Real Estate Authority, which I thought is transforming the real estate market and is playing a huge role in our day-to-day transactions in the real estate sector. So the Real Estate Authority digitized the real estate market. So now we have a real estate registry, and we have Ajir for the registration of leases. This gives a bit of comfort to both investors and owners and lenders. The whole ecosystem is given assurances through a more codified process, I would say, or registered process. The Real Estate General Authority also announced the off-plan sale and lease law, which operates under WAFI. This will, and is currently, we're seeing, is influencing how transactions are built, especially those with potential to get the benefit of funds from day one for the sale of plan units and residential houses. Finally, there is this also what I think is very interesting initiative is the Real Estate Arbitration Center. This means this is a huge development in the litigation world, so investors in the real estate can be comforted that if they're not 100% confident in the court system in the kingdom, they know that they can resort to the real estate arbitration system, which is one of its kind in the region. And one thing to touch on, which Hadil, you mentioned earlier, which is the real estate funds. I'm not going to talk about the law, but I will talk about what we see in transactions. So we're seeing a lot of traction from investors when it comes to real estate funds. They're seeing it as a structuring vehicle to enhance their position. One of the most popular funds is the dry real estate fund, where the fund would hold the asset, which is the recent development, and the developer would get paid in units, not in cash. And unless, of course, the fund is resolved, then they would get their cash out of it. What would come next? That's the second part of your question. So that's what would come next. I think we've all seen the announcement of His Excellency, the Minister of Finance in Davos about data centers and the regulatory regime that is being considered to regulate data embassies in the kingdom. So I think we are living in a digital age, and I'm excited personally to see what will come out of this legal reform and what it will mean to the kingdom as a hub in the digital and technology world.
Yeah, brilliant. And I think it's the transparency aspect coming out of the arbitration, coming about all of those different regulations. They are all aimed at transparency. And again, it's the ability to lay the platform and the foundations for that future value capture and investment and expansion that we're seeing. Definitely. I think, Chris, just on the events in terms of the calendar that we know is a very packed calendar. What are as an advisor, what are your clients doing to make themselves ready for those events?
Being prepared, and it often seems like the most obvious thing, but we talked a little bit earlier about that next generation of capability, and the AFC Cup, Football Cup is looming. The World Cup it seems a long way away, but it's not. The life cycle of a World Cup or an Olympic Games, whether it be winter or summer, and we all know that there are great plans ahead to host the Winter Games, of all things, in Saudi Arabia. So it goes back to what Tucker said, be bold, be different. And you have that courage to be different, which will attract people. But you've got to prepare, and you've got to upskill the next generation of people who will be the event managers, the commercial managers, the people who deliver, the hospitality sector, the real estate sector, who are actually building the infrastructure. So whilst it seems like a long way away, most Olympic Games are an 8 to 10 year cycle from the time you decide to bid as a nation, win the bid, put together the LOC, your local organising committee, and then deliver it. It comes around pretty quickly, very, very quickly. And then you've got to factor in, as we all touched on, post-event legacy. How do we ensure that the event, whatever it is, let's call it an Olympic Games or a World Cup, continues to deliver for the next generation of Saudis? So there are so many different things that are all interrelated, and luckily they're all chronological, but preparation is key. And I would probably say two things: preparation and recruiting the right people who are open and happy to pass that on to your local community and your local staff. Because next time round, in a perfect world, and we're probably doing ourselves out of a job here, but in a perfect world, local people should be doing this. Nationals should be doing this. So I think that's really the key.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. And Hadil, I think, again, you're speaking with clients daily. What are their thoughts at the moment in terms of this outlook that actually we need to be thinking about now in terms of making moves?
Well, clients, they're really excited about the change. Most of the businesses that I speak to, particularly international businesses who are kind of coming in with partnering up with some of the local firms here into consortiums or joint ventures or whatever, you name it. But one thing that they all ask about is that what is the best way to structure our business in the kingdom? What are the tax incentives, rules, regulation? I believe that because these are still kind of growing and developing, they need to be speaking not just with one party, but with so many stakeholders. But the nice thing that I would say about this is that most of the government, like ministries, authorities, they're really open to conversations. They're actually inviting delegates to discuss with them in terms of understanding their business and catering for their business. Even if something is not yet established, they're actually catering for that specifically. And this is what I actually enjoy doing. Speaking to MISA, the Ministry of Investment, REGA, they're all kind of jointly supporting those businesses to make sure that we have the best, and we're actually creating a friendly environment to attract investors to come into the kingdom. And I think Waad touched upon many of these changes in the regulations, but at least we're seeing that the digitization, how things are integrated in the government, they're also facilitating, with the data availability and the cybersecurity and all of that. And honestly, we are able to kind of talk about these with clients and to kind of make it more attractive for them to come and invest in Saudi.
Yeah, brilliant. And I think it's that agility and the ability for the kingdom to be quite nimble in terms of accommodating the requests as well. And again, personally, how we're structuring the advice and helping bring in investors in, it's that flexibility that I think has been quite attractive and successful to date. Simon, I think from an international perspective, again, on the hospitality side, you deal with a lot of international hospitality players. What are they talking to you about at the moment?
So I think when you look at the timelines that these events put very hard deadlines in place, and deadlines help. Specific, real, externally dependent deadlines that are not self-created. It builds confidence in the direction of change and travel and timing. And that means whether you're a consumer business, whether you're a developer, obviously developing a stadium, that's very visible, but it goes far, far further and deeper than that in terms of the impact it has on the way our clients are making decisions, whether they're a consumer brand or a developer or a hospitality provider, because they know that in this instance, this is a market that is emerging in a changed form, and there is an opportunity to have an impact, and they need to engage with decision-making now to enable their exposure into that opportunity. So deadlines really focus the mind, and we are starting to see that in a way that we just weren't seeing it 9, 12 months ago. And I think major events in the calendar that is set up and is being communicated and committed to is a key catalyst of that. And I think that is the single, over the last decade, the change has been there, it's evolving clearly, but clearly to people who are actively engaged with it. This agenda has now broadened that out to a different level, and we're starting to see it come into what is really that planning cycle that Chris was referring to, that is much longer than one might think. 2030 feels like that's quite a long way away. It is not that long away, even if you're a consumer business looking at where your brand positioning and investment is going to be. You're in the long-range plan, So you've got to make those decisions now, and you've got actual points of time to pin your decisions around, which are substantive, and that really changes the game.
Thank you, Simon.
Can I
Yeah, of course.
add? I would also say exactly to Simon's point, and we talked about it as we were walking in, and Tucker touched on it. Perception is one thing, reality is very, very different. We're all here. We love coming here. We love spending time here. I will bring my family here as tourists, sports tourists. But you have to keep telling the story. You have to keep telling people what it's like, because the perception is it might be difficult still, or it's a little bit overly structured. In actual fact, I could list, and I won't, but I could list half a dozen countries that are far more difficult to get done a major event. And in actual fact, I will. I'll shame my own country. The level of red tape and inability to get things done in Australia today is crippling. It doesn't happen here, which is a great thing. So we know it because we're in this room, we're in this industry, we're in this sector. But I think the only advice, or the fundamental advice we would give you from someone who wants to put major events of sport on and be successful on the playing field is keep telling people what it's like here.
Definitely. Thank you, Chris. And Wad, I think we touched on, international coming in, and look, actually there is a flip side. We don't want the globalization. We don't want everything to be homogenous. We don't want it to be the same. In our discussions prior to this, we were talking about international corridors. What are you seeing from your perspective in terms of where is the investment, where is the interest coming? These are global events, so naturally there is going to be that global interest. But again, as a Saudi, what are your thoughts on that?
We're definitely seeing a lot of interest. I mean, the word is out. It's already out, but there's work to be done, I reckon. So we're seeing international and local investors responding to the rapid infra changes in Saudi and to the projects announced by the kingdom. The nationalities of the investors are really not concentrated in one area. They're from different continents and regions. So we have people coming from the US, investors coming from East Asia, China, Korea, Japan, European countries, Italy, the UK, really from everywhere, not one city, not one country. And in terms of projects, it's everything. I've seen mining, I've seen renewable energy, I've seen transportation, and hospitality. It's everything. I mean, the kingdom is putting it all out there, offering all its potential and capabilities. We have the land, we have the utilities, and it's there for investors to grasp, right?
Yeah, no, and I think that's a really interesting aspect in terms of, look, it's not just the sports and events, it's actually these wider sectors, as you mentioned, mining and minerals, a broad range of interest.
Yeah.
Off the back of the kingdom getting the elevated status and understanding in terms of, look, we are open internationally for business as well. So thank you. Right, brilliant. So to conclude, I think it'd be quite nice just to get a quick minute from each of you. And Hadil, I'll start with yourself in terms of, looking at the capabilities we have in the market today in the kingdom in terms of delivering these events. What do you think needs to happen there?
Well, we need to continue to go out there and actually make that change. So in terms of the local capabilities, we've seen a lot of valuation companies growing, and I think they're going to continue to grow in the kingdom. But at the same time, there is a need for a better understanding of what's happening. And when I say what's happening, it's not just one area. You cannot focus on one area. You need to understand the broader change and there are laws and regulations happening on one side, but they will definitely impact you one way or another. So it's really having an open mind and understanding the ecosystem, and then deciding into how you want to take things forward. Internally, we are focusing on developing a real estate kind of experts, local experts. And that's not only from a tax perspective, but also from a legal perspective, because I deal with tax disputes and litigation. And we're seeing a lot also increase in real estate transactions disputes. But at the same time, you need to understand your rights. Because sometimes you would think that this is how things are being done. But when you go and actually, as I mentioned, have an open mind, speak to the regulators, lobby, they would actually listen. And changes are happening rapidly.
Brilliant, thank you. And Chris, from your perspective?
I think it is all about open mind, and not yourselves, more the rest of the world. This would be a lesson to the rest of the world, as I touched on before. That it's almost, Saudi Arabia has been a hidden gem, and that story I started with when I was that little boy and I saw your wonderful flag on that race car, and it pulled a note in my heart and my mind about, wow, what is this place like? Why have we, a British team, got this airline from the other side of the world that no one knows about it. Since 1978 and 1980, when we won the championship, so much has happened and we're here today. The rest of the world needs to keep up. And people are often intimidated by businesses or countries or organisations that move at pace. That's a good thing. Everyone's got to keep up. So the advice I would give to organisations, sports federations, infrastructure businesses, come here, see it yourself, keep an open mind, but remember, you've got to keep up and you've got to be reliable.
Brilliant. Thank you, Chris. And Wad?
So I agree with you. We will need to focus on, the talents and what we could offer here to the kingdom for these events to succeed. So I think one of the things for us to do is retain the right type of investors with experience in these types of events. And I would reckon, wearing my lawyer's hat, is that these investors, listening to these investors in terms of how the legal regime is serving these projects, conducting studies, open conversations with them on how the legal regime can be better improved and enhanced to serve the economy and what's to come in the future, and actually today, not only in the future, because it's, again, as Hadian mentioned, it's changing rapidly. In terms of the long-lasting legacy and how can we retain it and benefit from it, I would think the government has done so many initiatives already in this regard. One of the main ones is the local content requirement, requiring businesses to retain Saudi talents, to utilize local resources. So the transfer of knowledge is a key. Making sure that in 10 years' time that we have Saudi capabilities capable of, pushing forward the future of the kingdom in line of, I would assume there will be another vision because we're a very ambitious country, so we need to be ready.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much. And then Simon, from your perspective?
Yeah, I think, we've talked about global major events, and there's always a danger to emphasize the global in that. Most major events, the visitation is dominated by domestic visitors. The global aspect is the global reach. The provision of the event and the opportunity is hugely domestic. And that is something to have right at the core of, and that goes to the wider ecosystem change that we're seeing in Saudi Arabia across the board. And on the capabilities point, events are about experience, and experience is about people, and that's both the people attending the event and the people providing the event, from the headline act to the sports participants through to the hospitality providers. And it's that people engagement and the training and the mindset for that is an area that will make or break the successful impact of all of this. Because if the experience and the people engagement of that experience of what is a physical event, and the contrast between the physical and the virtual, every day increases, and we're seeing a re-emergence of the importance and the emphasis of the physical. So that physical experience and that human engagement has to be one to remember, and that is a capability that takes investment, training, and the right mindset. And I think that is something to really make sure is not lost in the focus on assets and technology and building the physical. Also hugely important, but both need to be delivered.
Brilliant. No, thank you very much, panelists. I think some really good insights in terms of how these major investments and real global class events are going to influence the real estate market in years to come. I think some definite key themes in terms of the commitment to keep it local and actually have that local Saudi spin on the events is going to be absolutely crucial, but then also Saudi benefiting from the legacy in those events. And then I think in terms of actually how we're going to deliver the events here, it's embracing the best of the international corridors, the international investors, and making sure that actually we provide that best experience, Simon, as you were just saying, and then think about actually the 10 years beyond 2030 as well, and the legacy beyond that. So thank you, everybody, and I'd like to invite everybody in a round of applause for the panelists. Thank you.